Most new cars promise everything. More screens, more features, more technology. But here's the problem, a lot of them don't feel built to last. They feel built to impress for the first owner and become someone else's headache later. And that's exactly why some older BMWs still make so much sense. Not all of them, of course. Because buying the wrong cheap BMW is still one of the fastest ways to turn your money into repair bills. But the right old BMW? That's a very different story. The right one gives you something most new cars no longer do: real engineering, real road feel, and in some cases, the kind of durability that makes modern cars look disposable. So in this video, we're looking at 5 affordable BMWs that can genuinely outlast a lot of newer cars if you buy the right engine, the right version, and the right example. And one of them is still, in my opinion, one of the smartest old-school BMW buys you can make today. 5. BMW E90. Let's start with one of the safest modern-era BMWs you can buy without spending stupid money. The E90 328i. This car sits in a very interesting sweet spot. It's modern enough to still feel usable every day. It's old enough to avoid a lot of the worst, newer BMW complexity. And most importantly, it came with one of the engines people still trust. That's the key here. Not every E90 belongs on this list. Not every cheap E90 is smart. But the naturally aspirated 328i is where things start to make sense. What makes this car special is balance. It still has that classic BMW feel: tight steering, planted chassis, low seating position, and that sense that the car actually wants to be driven. But it also has a much more mature, solid feel than a lot of newer compact cars. And unlike many newer cars that feel loaded with technology but weak underneath, the E90 328i feels like a real machine. Now, of course, it's still an older BMW. So yes, there are things you need to watch. Water pump, valve cover leaks, oil filter housing leaks, suspension wear, old plastic cooling components. But here's the important part. These are known issues. That's very different from a car that has deep design problems or an engine that makes no sense long-term. The E90 328i is not cheap because it's bad. It's cheap because people are scared of BMW ownership in general, and that creates opportunity. Because if you find one with good history, clean maintenance, and no signs of neglect, this is one of those rare, cheap BMWs that still feels premium, still feels honest, and still has the bones to keep going. This is the BMW for someone who wants old-school balance without going too old-school. 4. BMW E39. Now we move into one of the most respected BMWs ever made, the E39 5 Series. And if you talk to longtime BMW owners, a lot of them will tell you the E39 is where BMW really got the formula right. Not just in terms of driving, but in terms of overall feel. Because this car still feels expensive in the right ways. The doors feel heavy. The cabin feels driver-focused. The car feels stable, precise, and mature. And the 530i is the one that really makes sense if your goal is long-term ownership. Why? Because it gives you enough power to feel satisfying, but without the extra complexity and cost that come with some of the bigger engine models. This is one of those cars that still drives better than a lot of newer sedans, but also feels more solid than many cars that came after it. And that's the whole point of this video. These are not just old cars. These are cars that still feel fundamentally well-built. Now, the E39 is not a buy the cheapest one and hope kind of car. The cooling system matters a lot. Suspension refreshes matter. Bushings, control arms, and age-related wear are normal. Some electrical items may also need attention over time. But again, these are predictable old car issues. The real strength of the E39 is that once you sort the basics, the car still feels worth keeping. That's what separates a good old BMW from a bad one. A bad one feels like you're throwing money into the past. A good one feels like you're preserving something genuinely better than a lot of what replaced it. And the E39 530i absolutely belongs in that second category. It's one of those BMWs that reminds you why people became loyal to the brand in the first place. 3. BMW E46. If the E39 is the mature executive pick, the E46 330i is the one that still feels like the pure heart of BMW. This is one of those cars that people keep coming back to. Not because it's perfect, not because it's the cheapest car to maintain, but because when you drive a good one, it still feels right. And that matters, because the E46 came from a time when BMW still knew how to make a car feel light, connected, and mechanical without making it feel cheap or stripped out. The 330i is the version that really brings the platform to life. It has enough power to make the car feel serious, but still keeps the naturally aspirated simplicity that makes old BMWs worth buying in the first place. And that's why it deserves this spot. This is not a car that survives because it's boring. It survives because it was engineered with real depth. Yes, you have to respect the age of the platform. That means cooling system service, oil leaks, rear subframe concerns on some cars, suspension refreshes, window regulators, old trim pieces, and interior wear. But none of that changes the basic truth. A well-kept E46 330i is still one of the most satisfying, affordable BMWs you can own. And more importantly for this list, it's one of the few cheap enthusiast cars that can still make sense long-term. A lot of cheap performance cars are cheap because they're near the end. The E46 330i, if bought correctly, is cheap because the market still hasn't fully decided how much it should respect it. That makes it one of the best value BMWs out there. This is the car for the driver who still wants the classic BMW feeling, not filtered, not artificial, not inflated by fake tech. Just real steering, real balance, and a car that still feels alive. 2. BMW E60. Now, this one is a little more controversial, because the E60 gets mixed reactions. Some people love it. Some people hate the styling. Some people assume it's too modern to be safe and too old to be worth the risk. But the truth is, the right E60 is a much smarter buy than most people think. And once again, the key is choosing the right engine. The 530i is the version that gives you one of the best combinations of power, refinement, and long-term logic. This is the car that feels like BMW moving into a more modern world, but before everything became too soft, too numb, or too complicated for no reason. The E60 still feels like a proper BMW underneath the bigger body and cleaner cabin. And in daily use, it offers something the older cars don't always give you: more comfort, more space, and a more grown-up driving experience. That makes it especially interesting now, because a lot of newer mid-size sedans may look more modern, but they don't always feel better engineered. The E60 530i still feels planted, solid, and genuinely expensive on the road. And for buyers who want something bigger than a 3 Series, but don't want to jump into the worst modern BMW era, this car makes a lot of sense. Now yes, it still comes with the usual BMW warning. You need history. You need maintenance. You need to avoid neglected cars. You may still deal with cooling system issues, oil leaks, electronic quirks, suspension wear, old rubber and plastic components aging out. But the point is not that the E60 is perfect. The point is that the right one is still fundamentally worth saving. That's a huge difference, because many cars from this era are now cheap for the wrong reasons. The 530i, when chosen carefully, is cheap for reasons that can actually work in your favor. It's underrated, still handsome in a mature way, and much better mechanically than many buyers assume. 1. BMW E34. And now we get to the one that, in many ways, defines this whole list. The BMW E34 525i. This is not the newest car here. It's not the fastest. It's not the easiest one for everyone. But if we're talking about affordable BMWs that can outlast newer cars, this is one of the clearest examples of what that actually means. Because the E34 came from a completely different BMW era. An era when the company still built cars with a kind of seriousness that feels rare now. The doors are heavier. The body feels more substantial. The visibility is better. The car feels engineered, not optimized for subscriptions, screens, and warranty periods. And the 525i is the version that really captures that spirit. It gives you enough power, excellent balance, and a powertrain that still feels durable if maintained properly. This is not a car you buy because it's trendy. This is a car you buy because you understand what old BMW quality really feels like. Now, yes, because it's older, buying one takes patience. You need to inspect more carefully. You need to accept that age matters. You need to respect old cooling systems, suspension wear, vacuum leaks, electrical aging, rubber parts, previous owner neglect. But here's the difference between the E34 and a lot of newer cars. When you fix the E34, it usually feels like you're restoring strength. When you fix some newer cars, it feels like you're delaying the inevitable. That's why this car gets number 1. The E34 525i is not just durable for a BMW. It's one of those cars that reminds you that older German engineering, when done right, can still make a lot of today's advanced cars feel weak. It is simple enough to be respected, solid enough to feel expensive, and old enough to come from a better philosophy. And that's why, even now, it's still one of the most meaningful, affordable BMWs you can buy. Conclusion. The biggest mistake people make with cheap BMWs is assuming newer always means better. It doesn't. In many cases, the smarter move is not buying the newest BMW you can afford. It's buying the right older BMW with the right engine, the right history, and the right fundamentals. That's the real pattern here. The E90 328i is the modern safe bet. The E39 530i is the mature classic. The E46 330i is the enthusiast favorite. The E60 530i is the underrated executive buy. And the E34 525i is the old-school tank that still reminds you what BMW used to be. None of these cars are perfect, but all of them make more sense than a lot of newer cars people are overpaying for. And in a world full of disposable new cars, that matters more than ever. So now I want to know, which one of these 5 would you actually trust the most as a daily in 2026?